Getting a comment like this is one of my biggest pet peeves of my career. It shows a lack of critical thinking, or at least a lack of attention to me. And that's disappointing because it can be so enjoyable to talk about video games, to talk about what we love, about what came before, what we're excited about what's coming, and what we love about what's going on now. But we also need to be critical and skeptical of things being pushed on us all the time. I am an avid appreciator of the past. It's core to many things that I do every day, but I don't live in the past. Glancing at my channel reveals plenty of modern games and tech. 4K videos, OLED TVs, the Steam Deck, Warframe, Splitgate, Wukong, Star Wars Hunters over on the iPad, E3 reactions, newer Call of Duties and Battlefield titles. The reality is that a well-informed opinion is from someone who both engages with modernity, modern tech, modern games, whatever the subject is, the ongoing day-to-day stuff, and understands the past. Either you lived through it and you regularly assess if what you remember is correct, or you go back and study it. For me, it's both. Me preferring characteristics of the old things is not an attack on you for liking the new things. I think I explained it best here in the first episode of the Dual Comm Podcast I made with BBK Dragoon. Link to it will be in the description, but here is an excerpt for it if you are interested.
This is, we're always going to get these comments when we have these discussions. There's players who started their gaming journey, maybe PlayStation 4 onward, who hear some of these talks and just respond super angry or negative towards it, and it makes talking about games a little bit less fun because it's just a discussion talking about ways games can be better without being overly negative. I guess what I'm trying to say here is we grew up on the schoolyard talking about this kind of stuff for the games we were playing and what we liked and what we didn't, and it never turned into the way discourse online now is, which is just you versus me. If you don't see it my way, you're the worst. I hate you. And it has made, honestly, game discourse just a little bit less fun. Everything has this weird toxic undercurrent that doesn't need to come into the conversation. Hey, we all really like games.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some really awesome things that are releasing right now. So let's just talk about it in a chill way. Elements from the past that are cool, elements from that now that are amazing. And it isn't always old versus new. And I think a lot of the new player generation comes in with their guard up, ready to throw fists over these kind of conversations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like no one who has a critique of the new thing is saying you are bad for liking it. Like if you played the new version of a game and you were fine with it, like if you didn't find PS4's Shadow of the Colossus super difficult and you loved the graphics and can't imagine going back and playing some decrepit looking PS2 version, that's great. That's fine. But we just want some degree of a compromise that can make everyone happy, or at least we're going to express that we want the improvements that could be relatively easily brought forward. And I think it's an inherent nature. You brought up the schoolyard kind of conversation. There is a vibe you get when you're talking in a group in person, just like throwing ideas back and forth, that is supposed to be felt when you're talking in a group online. But due to the communication kind of channels, it doesn't come out that way. And even just like what we're doing right now, like you and I are talking to each other, and anything we say that might critique something that the other doesn't like, we're not going to take that way. But to a viewer, it might feel like, it's a one way, we're talking at them. Therefore, if they disagree, they are not a direct part of the real-time conversation. So they must be they must defend it inherently. It's really hard. It's really hard. And I think back to my favorite era with gaming magazines, and often they would have a little editor's letter at the start where someone wrote in some really nasty email or mailed in a letter, like trashing someone's game review. And the editor or the author of that review or whatever would have a fun, kind of sarcastic, but also like down to earth response of like, well, that part is silly, but if you like it, that's totally fine. I'm just looking at it from this perspective. But the person reading the magazine was like sitting there fuming because this is their favorite game and it got a 6 out of 10 or something. And I think that was the ancestor to what we see now. And it's just a nature of the single directional kind of conversations that online stuff allows for.
Yes. It's team sports. It's a win and a loss instead of a conversation.
Yes.
And that's not anybody listening to this. Go form your own thoughts and stories and opinions about the stuff that you enjoy and the things that you don't. I think that's okay. Weird story. Went to a lunch last week at a local burger spot. It's near the local high school.
Mm-hmm.
And the high schoolers all are coming at the same time. And it was really weird for me. I felt incredibly old because they all are wearing 90s grunge style clothing, like really big, baggy, almost Jinko kind of style jeans.
Yep.
And they looked like carbon copies of one another. They were all wearing that style. And I looked at it and I went, oh, yeah, that's right. High school is awful. Like everybody's trying to fit in. It's extraordinarily hard. Like you can see it now that we're away from it and we're older and we really don't care. Like we've learned to discern whose feedback we give a rip about and whose we don't. But seeing that and that pressure to fit in and pressure to basically be the same, to do the thing, I think when people are talking about games or media or their hobbies or whatever, the internet has made it to where there has to be one or two popular opinions that you align with and you go with. And if you don't, you're somehow wrong. Forget that. Anybody listening to this is their own person who gets to come up with whatever opinions about the stuff in the media and the games they play. And they should be freaking confident about that and be confident in their own thoughts. We've talked about this before. If you are forming your opinions just based off of secondhand feedback, like you haven't actually played the game, go try it and find it for yourself.
I'm gonna loop two thoughts to this that will sound disjointed, but they aren't. One is my biggest like pet peeve whenever we have these discussions is when someone says, or like I put out like my videos about a console like the PS3 or the PS2, and someone's just like, you're just living in nostalgia, man. It's time to get with the times. Because I'm not. I still buy and play modern games all the time. I just have a experienced, informed opinion. It doesn't mean mine's more right, but it is my informed opinion from decades now of gaming, and I'm still immersing myself in the new. I'm not avoiding it out of nostalgia. I'm just trying to balance it. And people often jump to, well, if old's good and new bad, then rawr. But I also think back to like 10 or so years ago, the late Total Biscuit really struggled with feedback on reviews once YouTuber reviews became more common, because everyone got obsessed with this idea of lack of bias and the idea that if your review stood out from everyone else, it's because you were biased or you weren't objective enough. And he railed pretty hard against that idea because every reviewer under the sun, especially with a hobby medium like games, is biased. They grew up with certain systems and games. They had access to certain systems and games. They have preferences of genres, of mechanics, of graphic styles. You cannot be unbiased when it comes to liking a game or liking how it is played. And he always argued that you need you either need to align yourself with reviewers whose biases mimic your own, like people who prefer shooters in this way or who prefer open world games or who don't like open world games. Or if you want a quote unquote objective take on the game, then you need to immerse yourself in a diverse group of opinions of people who like lots of different kinds of games, and that it should be made very clear what each reviewer kind of likes or doesn't like. And I feel like we still, as an online gaming community on the whole or something, have not really grasped that, because the same kind of thing, whenever there is a dissenting voice that doesn't like something about a game, even if it is a valid criticism or even if they like something about a game that is currently being dunked on for like one little thing, you are the wrong one. Even though there is no right and wrong about liking a mechanic or a way a game plays or whatever. You are seen as wrong because you're not just joining the hive mind for a little bit. And then in 5 years, we look back and we're like, yeah, that game was actually pretty good.
So much now, too, of those big macro takes. We mentioned the one or two popular ideas that pretty much everybody gloms onto. So much of that comes from big streamer playing game.
Yeah.
Says something and then immediately looks at the chat's reception and then steer that thought in the direction that the chat backs up. I really don't want to get into the whole, like, there's so much anger about all of this stuff and streaming ruined games and all this. I don't agree with that. But it is pretty easy to see trends that appear fast from a take that was made by somebody who was multitasking. It's really hard to play a game and talk to a chat at the same time and then form a really mature and developed thought about some piece of feedback or some news. And before you know it, pitchforks are out, everybody's united and taking up this new cause because of 3 sentences big streamer said because they got immediate feedback from their chat, and so they leaned in that direction.
And it's made worse by the game of telephone. You mentioned before people who form their opinions without doing the thing. It is seen as normal to form your opinions about a game or whatever through the lens of someone else playing it. And that's not like your opinion is inherently skewed by not having experienced it firsthand and experiencing it with the, I hate to use this word, but influence of someone else. And I, even as aware of this as I might be, especially as a creator, as someone who complains about this phenomenon, I can find myself feeling my take on a topic, on a whatever, kind of aligning with whoever is talking at the time until I go and engage with it myself. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't actually agree with that. And I'm going to sound like a little bit of a hypocrite here because for the most part, I can very easily come to a conclusion of whether I'm going to like or really truly enjoy a game based on gameplay reveals alone, because I have enough years of experience of knowing what I like and don't like that I can watch a gameplay reveal and be, as long as it's real gameplay and not just scripted whatever, like, true gameplay, I can be like, all right, I could have a good time with this, or like that one thing is going to be enough of a pain for me that I'm just not going to like it. But that comes from a lot of experience of actually playing games, and people who don't have deep experiences can't come to that same conclusion watching someone else play it. And when I say gameplay, I mean raw, unedited, uncommentated, no face cam in the corner gameplay. I'm not talking about a live stream where someone else is like just pure raw developers showing gameplay, or someone else's like no commentary let's play, like pure gameplay. Otherwise, there's other things that can influence it. But I think that without enough confidence in your experience yourself, building your opinions based on someone else's experience with the thing is a flawed strategy in general.
You want to have more fun with games. This is just my opinion.
Play them.
Yeah. Stop watching YouTube and Twitch and go try demos and go try games. I think the more you can disconnect and just go try and experience the things you're interested in, the better time you're going to have.
Again, that's the Dual Comm Podcast with BBK Dragoon. Video podcast link is in the description, as well as links to it on podcast services if you'd rather just listen to it on the go.